In a small
Can I
town
just
where
have a
life was
glass of
slow and
water,
simple,
please?
a
Yes, of
billionaire
course.
named Richard decided to try something new for himself. He was not interested in showing
Yeah,
off his
can I get
money
a glass of
or living the
Chardonnay,
life
please?
of luxury that others
Certainly.
expected from him.
Certainly.
Instead, Richard
And for
wanted
your
to learn
meal.
how ordinary people survived and thrived when times were tough. He believed that there was wisdom hidden in the lives of everyday people, and he was determined to discover it. To do this, Richard made a plan. He would go undercover without telling anyone who he really was. He chose a quiet town where nobody knew his name or face. He wore old jeans, a faded shirt, and a cheap hat. He even grew a little beard to help hide his identity. Richard wanted to be just another stranger in the crowd, not the billionaire everyone read about in magazines. One sunny morning, Richard entered a small diner on Main Street. The place was bright and welcoming, but the signs of struggle were everywhere. The chairs were old, the wallpaper was peeling, and the menu offered only simple, affordable dishes. Richard chose a table in the corner so he could watch and listen without drawing attention. He ordered a coffee and studied the people around him. Most of them looked tired, but they greeted each other with smiles and friendly words. Richard wondered how these people managed to stay cheerful despite their difficult lives. Soon, a waitress named Elaine approached Richard's table. Elaine was a kind woman in her 30s. She wore a simple uniform and kept her hair tied back. Her smile seemed genuine, and she greeted each customer as if she knew them personally. Richard noticed that Elaine moved quickly from table to table. She refilled cups, wiped down surfaces, and always had a positive word for everyone. Elaine worked hard every day to support her young daughter. She lived in a small apartment and worried about paying bills. But despite her problems, Elaine never complained and always tried to help others. As Richard watched Elaine work, he became more curious about her life. He wanted to understand how she managed her finances. He noticed that she chose her words carefully when talking about money. She told a group of regular customers, "It's not what you make, it's what you keep that counts." Her advice was simple, but Richard thought it was wise after a while. He decided to speak with Elaine directly when she came to his table. Richard tried to act like a normal customer struggling with money. He smiled and said, "Elaine, do you have any financial advice for someone trying to get by?" He hoped she would respond with a joke or just shrug off his question, but Elaine looked at Richard and paused for a moment. She seemed to think carefully before answering. Her first word surprised him. She said, "Have you learned to listen to yourself before your wallet?" Richard was taken back by her honesty. Elaine explained that she had learned to trust her own instincts and values before making decisions about money. She believed the most important thing was to know what mattered most in life. Elaine told Richard stories about her own struggles. She shared how she saved small amounts every week, how she avoided debt when she could, and how she always put her daughter's needs first. Elaine's advice was not about quick fixes or secrets for getting rich. Instead, she taught Richard that real happiness came from honesty, caring for family and finding joy in simple things. Richard listened to Elaine's stories with great interest. He realized that her life was very different from his own. She had faced real problems, made real sacrifices, and learned important lessons along the way. Richard admired Elaine's strength and wisdom. He began to see that the answers he was looking for might not come from books or experts, but from people like Elaine who lived honest, hardworking lives. The morning passed quickly as Elaine and Richard talked while she worked. He noticed the other customers enjoyed hearing her advice too. Many people thanked her for her kindness and support. Richard understood that Elaine was not just a waitress, she was a leader in her community, helping others to smile even when things were hard. By the end of the breakfast rush, Richard felt grateful for the chance to meet Elaine. He promised himself that he would come back tomorrow. He wanted to learn even more from the people he once overlooked. Richard left the diner feeling inspired and hopeful. He believed that his undercover mission was just beginning, and that real wisdom was found in the hearts and minds of ordinary people like Elaine. Elaine Johnson woke up at 5 in the morning, just like she did every other day. The alarm clock buzzed loudly in her tiny bedroom, and she quickly reached over to turn it off. She did not want the noise to wake up her 7-year-old daughter, Maya, who was still sleeping peacefully in the next room. Elaine moved quietly through the dark apartment. Careful not to make any sound, she walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked tired, but Elaine smiled anyway. She reminded herself that today was another chance to make things better. After getting dressed in her waitress uniform, Elaine tiptoed into Maya's room. She gently kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "I love you, sweetheart." Maya stirred a little but did not wake up. Elaine felt grateful that her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, agreed to watch Maya every morning before school. Mrs. Patterson was kind and never charged much money, but Elaine always tried to pay her something, even if it was just a few dollars or a home-cooked meal. Elaine believed in helping those who helped her, even when she had very little to give. The walk to the diner took about 20 minutes, and Elaine enjoyed the quiet morning air. She passed closed shops, empty streets, and a few early workers heading to their own jobs. Elaine thought about her life and the choices she had made. She became a single mother 3 years ago when Maya's father left without warning. He never sent money or called to check on their daughter. At first, Elaine felt angry and hurt, but over time she learned to let go of those feelings. She realized that holding on to anger only made her tired, and she needed all her energy to take care of Maya. Working at the diner was not easy, but Elaine was good at her job. She knew how to make customers feel welcome and comfortable. She remembered their names, their favorite orders, and even small details about their lives. Some customers came to the diner just to talk to Elaine because they felt lonely or stressed. She always listened with patience and kindness. Even when her feet hurt from standing all day, Elaine never let her smile fade. She understood that everyone carried their own burdens, and sometimes a friendly face was all they needed to feel better. Money was always tight for Elaine. She earned minimum wage plus tips, which was barely enough to cover rent, food, and other expenses. Every month felt like a battle to make ends meet. Elaine kept a small notebook where she wrote down every dollar she spent. She learned to cut costs wherever she could. She bought groceries from discount stores, cooked simple meals at home, and avoided spending money on anything that was not absolutely necessary. Elaine also set aside $5 every week into a small savings jar. It was not much, but she believed that even tiny steps could lead to big changes over time. Despite her financial struggles, Elaine refused to let poverty define her or her daughter. She made sure Maya had clean clothes, healthy food, and a safe place to sleep. Elaine also encouraged Maya to dream big and work hard in school. She told her daughter stories about strong women who overcame difficulties and achieved great things. Elaine wanted Maya to believe that their current situation was temporary, and that a better future was possible if they stayed hopeful and determined. One of the hardest parts of Elaine's life was dealing with unexpected expenses. A few months ago, Maya got sick and needed medicine that was not covered by their basic health insurance. Elaine had to borrow money from a co-worker to pay for it. She felt embarrassed asking for help, but she knew her daughter's health was more important than her pride. Elaine paid back the loan slowly, a little bit each week until the debt was cleared. That experience taught her an important lesson. She realized that asking for help was not a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength and responsibility. Elaine also found support in her community. The people at her church were kind and generous. They organized food drives and helped families in need without asking for anything in return. Elaine volunteered at the church whenever she had time, helping to serve meals and organize donations. She believed that giving back to the community made her feel connected and valued. It reminded her that she was not alone in her struggles, and that there were good people willing to stand by her side. At the end of each long day, Elaine returned home exhausted but satisfied. She cooked dinner for Maya, helped her with homework, and tucked her into bed with a bedtime story. Before going to sleep, Elaine wrote in her journal, reflecting on the day's challenges and blessings. She wrote about the customers who made her laugh, the tips that helped her pay a bill, and the small moments of joy that kept her going. Elaine's life was not easy, but it was filled with love, hope, and a deep belief that hard work and honesty would eventually lead to better days. She did not know that her life was about to change in ways she could never imagine, thanks to a stranger who had been watching and learning from her all along. Richard returned to the diner the next morning, carrying a newspaper and wearing the same ordinary clothes. He chose the same corner table and sat down, hoping to observe more of the life he had missed while living in his world of wealth and luxury. The diner was busier than the day before, filled with workers grabbing breakfast before their shifts and retirees enjoying their morning coffee. Richard watched as people greeted each other warmly, sharing jokes and stories. He realized that this place was more than just a restaurant. It was a gathering spot where the community came together. Elaine spotted Richard as soon as he walked in. She remembered him from yesterday and wondered why he had returned. Most customers who passed through town never came back. But something about this quiet stranger made her curious. She walked over to his table with a coffee pot in her hand and smiled. "Good morning, you're back again," she said cheerfully. Richard looked up and nodded. "Yes, I liked the atmosphere here. And the coffee was good," he replied, trying to sound casual. Elaine poured him a cup and asked if he wanted to order breakfast. Richard chose a simple meal of eggs and toast. Nothing fancy. As Elaine moved between tables, Richard continued to watch her. He noticed how she remembered everyone's orders without writing them down, how she laughed at their jokes even when they were not very funny, and how she checked on elderly customers to make sure they were doing okay. Richard had spent his entire life surrounded by people who wanted something from him, whether it was money, connections, or favors. But Elaine seemed different. She gave her time and energy to others without expecting anything in return. Richard found this refreshing and deeply admirable. After the breakfast rush slowed down, Elaine returned to Richard's table to refill his coffee. Richard decided this was his chance to start a real conversation. He looked at her and said, "You seem to really care about the people here." Elaine smiled and replied, "Of course I do. These are my neighbors, my friends. They've helped me through tough times, so I try to help them too." Richard nodded thoughtfully. He had never experienced that kind of connection with his own neighbors. In his wealthy neighborhood, people barely spoke to each other. Richard decided to take a risk. He wanted to see if Elaine's wisdom was as real as it seemed. So he lowered his voice and said, "Elaine, can I ask you something personal?" Elaine looked at him with a bit of surprise but nodded. "Sure, what's on your mind?" Richard hesitated for a moment, then said, "I'm struggling with my finances. I feel like no matter what I do, I can't seem to find peace or satisfaction. Do you have any advice?" He kept his tone serious, pretending to be someone who was genuinely lost. Elaine studied Richard's face for a moment. She could see worry in his eyes, though she did not know it was not about money but about purpose. She set down the coffee pot and sat in the empty chair across from him. "Can I ask you a question first?" she said gently. Richard nodded. Elaine leaned forward and asked, "Have you learned to listen to yourself before your wallet?" Richard was stunned by her words. He had expected something simple like budgeting tips or advice on saving money, but instead, Elaine had cut straight to the heart of his struggle. "What do you mean by that?" Richard asked, genuinely curious. Elaine took a deep breath and explained, "A lot of people think money is the answer to all their problems. They believe if they just had more of it, everything would be fine, but the truth is, money can't fix what's broken inside. If you don't know who you are or what you truly value, then no amount of money will bring you peace." Richard listened carefully, feeling as though Elaine was speaking directly to his soul. She continued, "I've been poor most of my life, but I've learned that happiness comes from knowing what matters most. For me, it's my daughter, my community, and staying true to my values." Richard was deeply moved by her honesty. He realized that Elaine had something he had been searching for his entire life, a sense of purpose and inner peace. He asked, "How do you stay positive when things are so hard?" Elaine smiled softly and said, "I don't pretend things are easy, but I choose to focus on what I can control. I can't control how much money I make, but I can control how I spend it. I can't change the past, but I can work toward a better future for my daughter, and most importantly, I remind myself every day that my worth is not measured by my bank account." Richard felt a lump in his throat. He had spent decades measuring his worth by his net worth, and it had left him feeling empty. Elaine's words were like a mirror reflecting everything he had been doing wrong. He wanted to tell her who he really was, but he knew it was not the right time. Instead, he simply said, "Thank you, Elaine. That's the most honest advice anyone has ever given me." Elaine stood up and patted his shoulder gently. "You're welcome, and remember, it's never too late to start listening to yourself." As Elaine walked away to serve other customers, Richard sat in silence, processing everything she had said. He realized that this encounter was not a coincidence. He had come to this town searching for answers, and he had found them in the most unexpected place. In the words of a waitress who had less money than anyone he knew but more wisdom than all his wealthy friends combined, Richard decided that he would continue coming to the diner, not to observe Elaine from a distance, but to learn from her directly over the next few days. Richard became a regular at the diner. He and Elaine developed a quiet friendship, built on honest conversations and mutual respect. Richard never revealed his true identity, and Elaine never asked too many questions. She simply treated him like she treated everyone else, with kindness and respect. Richard began to see the world through Elaine's eyes, and it changed him in ways he never expected. He started to understand that true wealth was not about having money, but about having purpose, connection, and integrity. And for the first time in years, Richard felt truly alive. Richard continued visiting the diner every morning for the next 2 weeks, and each visit brought him closer to understanding what had been missing from his life. He arrived early before the breakfast rush, so he could have quiet conversations with Elaine without interrupting her work. Over time, their talks became more personal and meaningful. Richard asked questions about Elaine's approach to life, and she answered with the same honesty and wisdom that had first caught his attention. She never suspected that the man sitting across from her was a billionaire, and Richard was grateful for that. He wanted her to see him as just another person seeking guidance. One morning, Elaine sat down across from Richard during her short break. She held a cup of tea in her hands and looked tired but content. Richard noticed the exhaustion in her eyes and asked, "Do you ever feel like giving up?" Elaine smiled softly and shook her head. "Of course I feel that way sometimes, but giving up is not an option when you have someone depending on you. My daughter needs me, and that gives me strength even on the hardest days." Richard admired her determination. He had never felt that kind of responsibility because his wealth had always protected him from real struggle. Elaine then shared some of the practical lessons she had learned over the years. She explained how she managed her small income by focusing on needs instead of wants. "I only buy what we truly need," she said, "and I avoid debt as much as possible. Debt is like a chain that keeps you trapped, and I refuse to live that way." Richard listened carefully, realizing that many wealthy people he knew lived with enormous debt, despite having millions of dollars. They borrowed money to buy bigger houses, fancier cars, and luxury vacations. Elaine's approach was the complete opposite, and it made more sense to him. Elaine also talked about the importance of community and relationships. She told Richard that some of her happiest moments came from helping neighbors and sharing meals with friends. "Money can't buy real friendship or trust," she said. "Those things come from being there for people when they need you, not just when it's convenient." Richard thought about his own life and realized he had very few real friends. Most of the people in his circle were business associates or people who wanted something from him. He felt lonely even though he was always surrounded by people. Another lesson Elaine shared was about gratitude. She explained that every night before bed, she wrote down 3 things she was grateful for. No matter how small they were, gratitude changes your perspective, she said. When you focus on what you have instead of what you lack, you feel richer, even if your bank account is empty. Richard was struck by the simplicity and power of this practice. He had spent so much time worrying about business deals, investments, and competitors that he had forgotten to appreciate the good things in his life. Elaine also believed strongly in honesty and integrity. She told Richard about a time when a customer accidentally left a $100 bill on the table. She could have kept the money and no one would have known, but she ran after the customer and returned it. "I may be poor, but I'm not a thief," she said proudly. "My integrity is worth more than any amount of money." Richard felt ashamed because he knew that in the business world, people often cut corners and bent the rules to get ahead. He had done it himself many times, justifying it as necessary for success. As their conversations continued, Richard began to see that Elaine's wisdom came from her lived experience. She had faced real hardship, made difficult choices, and learned valuable lessons through trial and error. Her advice was not theoretical or academic. It was grounded in reality. Richard realized that all the books he had read and seminars he had attended could not compare to the wisdom of someone who had lived through struggle and emerged stronger. One day, Richard asked Elaine what happiness meant to her. She thought for a moment and then said, "Happiness is knowing that I'm doing my best for my daughter, that I'm staying true to my values, and that I'm connected to people who care about me. It's not about having a lot of money or things. It's about having peace of mind and a sense of purpose." Richard felt a deep sense of envy because Elaine had something he desperately wanted, but did not know how to find. Elaine also shared her dreams with Richard. She wanted to save enough money to send her daughter to college someday. She wanted to open a small business that would give her more control over her time, and she wanted to help other single mothers who were struggling just like she had. "I know these dreams might seem small to some people," she said, "but they mean everything to me." Richard did not think her dreams were small at all. In fact, he thought they were beautiful and meaningful. Richard began to apply some of Elaine's lessons to his own life. He started keeping a gratitude journal, writing down 3 things he appreciated each day. He began to question his spending habits and realized how much money he wasted on things that brought him no real joy. He also reached out to old friends he had lost touch with and tried to rebuild those relationships. These small changes made a big difference in how he felt. He started to experience moments of genuine happiness that had nothing to do with money or success. As the days passed, Richard became more convinced that Elaine deserved better than the life she was living. He wanted to help her, but he knew he had to be careful. If he revealed his identity too soon, it might change their relationship. And he valued their honest conversations too much to risk losing them. So Richard decided to wait for the right moment. He would continue learning from Elaine, and when the time was right, he would find a way to give back to the woman who had taught him so much about what truly mattered in life. 3 weeks had passed since Richard first walked into the diner, and his friendship with Elaine had grown stronger with each conversation. He looked forward to their morning talks more than any business meeting or social event he had attended in years. Elaine treated him like a real friend, someone she could trust and confide in, and Richard valued that trust deeply. He had learned so much from her about living with integrity, finding joy in simple things and staying strong through difficult times. But Richard also knew that there was still much about Elaine's life that she had not shared with him. One morning, Richard noticed that Elaine seemed more tired than usual. Her smile was still there, but it looked forced, and her movements were slower. When she brought his coffee, Richard could see dark circles under her eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked with genuine concern. Elaine hesitated for a moment, then sat down across from him. "I'm just dealing with some things," she said quietly. Richard could tell she was holding something back, so he gently encouraged her. "You've helped me so much with your advice. Maybe I can help you too," he said. Elaine looked at Richard and sighed. She had been carrying a heavy burden alone for too long, and something about Richard's kind eyes made her feel safe enough to share it. "My daughter Maya needs to see a dentist," she began. "She's been having pain in her tooth for weeks, but I can't afford the treatment. I've been calling around to different clinics, trying to find one that offers payment plans, but so far I haven't had any luck." Richard's heart broke as he listened. He had spent thousands of dollars on luxury watches and expensive dinners without thinking twice. While Elaine was struggling to get basic health care for her child, Elaine continued, "I've been picking up extra shifts whenever I can, but it's still not enough. The dentist said Maya needs a root canal, and that costs more money than I have saved. I keep telling Maya that we'll fix it soon, but I can see the pain in her eyes every day, and it kills me." Tears welled up in Elaine's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She was not used to showing weakness, especially at work. Richard wanted to write her a check right then and there, but he knew that would raise too many questions. Instead, he said, "I'm so sorry you're going through this. You're a great mother, and Maya is lucky to have you." As the days went on, Elaine opened up more about the other struggles she faced. She told Richard about the time her car broke down, and she had to walk 2 hours to work in the rain because she could not afford a taxi. She shared how she sometimes skipped lunch so that Maya could have a better dinner, and how she worried constantly about what would happen if she got sick and could not work. Each story revealed the depth of Elaine's sacrifices and the weight of her responsibilities. Richard listened with deep respect and growing determination to help her. One afternoon, Elaine mentioned something that surprised Richard. She said, "You know, even though things are hard, I still try to help others when I can. Last month, one of my neighbors lost her job, so I brought her some food from the diner. It wasn't much, but I wanted her to know someone cared." Richard was amazed by Elaine's generosity. She had so little, yet she still found ways to give to others. This was the kind of character that Richard had rarely seen in his wealthy circles, where people hoarded their resources and competed against each other. Richard also learned about Elaine's dreams and fears. She told him that her biggest fear was not being able to provide a better future for Maya. "I don't want her to struggle the way I have," Elaine said. "I want her to go to college, to have opportunities that I never had, to see the world and know that she can be anything she wants to be." Richard could hear the love and hope in Elaine's voice, and it moved him deeply. He realized that Elaine was not just fighting for survival, she was fighting for her daughter's future. Elaine also shared a secret dream that she had never told anyone before. "Sometimes I imagine opening a small community center where single mothers can get help with childcare, financial advice, and job training," she said. "I know it sounds impossible, but I believe if we help each other, we can all do better." Richard was inspired by her vision. Elaine was not just thinking about herself. She was thinking about lifting up an entire community. This was the kind of leadership and compassion that the world desperately needed. As Richard listened to Elaine's struggles, he began to feel a deep sense of guilt. He had so much wealth and power, yet he had done so little to help people like Elaine. He had donated to charities and attended fundraising events, but those actions felt hollow and distant compared to the real human connection he was experiencing now. Richard realized that true generosity was not just about writing checks. It was about seeing people, listening to their stories, and responding with genuine care and action. Richard made a decision that day. He would help Elaine, but he would do it in a way that honored her dignity and respected her independence. He did not want to just throw money at her problems. He wanted to create real opportunities for her to succeed. Richard knew that the time was coming when he would have to reveal his true identity. But first, he needed to earn Elaine's trust even more deeply. He needed her to understand that his desire to help came from a place of genuine friendship and respect, not pity or obligation. That evening, Richard sat in his hotel room and made several phone calls. He contacted a dentist he knew and arranged for Maya to receive treatment at no cost. He set up a scholarship fund that would cover Maya's education from elementary school through college. He also began planning a business venture that would create jobs and opportunities for single mothers in the community. Richard was careful to keep his involvement secret for now, but he felt a sense of purpose and excitement that he had not felt in years. Helping Elaine and her community was giving him the meaning and fulfillment he had been searching for all along. 3 weeks had passed since Richard first walked into the diner, and his friendship with Elaine had grown stronger with each conversation. He looked forward to their morning talks more than any business meeting or social event he had attended in years. Elaine treated him like a real friend, someone she could trust and confide in, and Richard valued that trust deeply. He had learned so much from her about living with integrity, finding joy in simple things, and staying strong through difficult times. But Richard also knew that there was still much about Elaine's life that she had not shared with him. One morning, Richard noticed that Elaine seemed more tired than usual. Her smile was still there, but it looked forced, and her movements were slower. When she brought his coffee, Richard could see dark circles under her eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked with genuine concern. Elaine hesitated for a moment, then sat down across from him. "I'm just dealing with some things," she said quietly. Richard could tell she was holding something back, so he gently encouraged her. "You've helped me so much with your advice. Maybe I can help you too," he said. Elaine looked at Richard and sighed. She had been carrying a heavy burden alone for too long, and something about Richard's kind eyes made her feel safe enough to share it. "My daughter Maya needs to see a dentist," she began. "She's been having pain in her tooth for weeks, but I can't afford the treatment. I've been calling around to different clinics, trying to find one that offers payment plans, but so far I haven't had any luck." Richard's heart broke as he listened. He had spent thousands of dollars on luxury watches and expensive dinners without thinking twice. While Elaine was struggling to get basic health care for her child, Elaine continued, "I've been picking up extra shifts whenever I can. But it's still not enough. The dentist said Maya needs a root canal, and that costs more money than I have saved. I keep telling Maya that we'll fix it soon, but I can see the pain in her eyes every day, and it kills me." Tears welled up in Elaine's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. She was not used to showing weakness, especially at work. Richard wanted to write her a check right then and there, but he knew that would raise too many questions. Instead, he said, "I'm so sorry you're going through this. You're a great mother, and Maya is lucky to have you." As the days went on, Elaine opened up more about the other struggles she faced. She told Richard about the time her car broke down, and she had to walk 2 hours to work in the rain because she could not afford a taxi. She shared how she sometimes skipped lunch so that Maya could have a better dinner, and how she worried constantly about what would happen if she got sick and could not work. Each story revealed the depth of Elaine's sacrifices and the weight of her responsibilities. Richard listened with deep respect and growing determination to help her. One afternoon, Elaine mentioned something that surprised Richard. She said, "You know, even though things are hard, I still try to help others when I can. Last month, one of my neighbors lost her job, so I brought her some food from the diner. It wasn't much, but I wanted her to know someone cared." Richard was amazed by Elaine's generosity. She had so little, yet she still found ways to give to others. This was the kind of character that Richard had rarely seen in his wealthy circles, where people hoarded their resources and competed against each other. Richard also learned about Elaine's dreams and fears. She told him that her biggest fear was not being able to provide a better future for Maya. "I don't want her to struggle the way I have," Elaine said. "I want her to go to college, to have opportunities that I never had, to see the world and know that she can be anything she wants to be." Richard could hear the love and hope in Elaine's voice, and it moved him deeply. He realized that Elaine was not just fighting for survival, she was fighting for her daughter's future. Elaine also shared a secret dream that she had never told anyone before. "Sometimes I imagine opening a small community center where single mothers can get help with childcare, financial advice and job training," she said. "I know it sounds impossible, but I believe if we help each other, we can all do better." Richard was inspired by her vision. Elaine was not just thinking about herself. She was thinking about lifting up an entire community. This was the kind of leadership and compassion that the world desperately needed. As Richard listened to Elaine's struggles, he began to feel a deep sense of guilt. He had so much wealth and power, yet he had done so little to help people like Elaine. He had donated to charities and attended fundraising events, but those actions felt hollow and distant compared to the real human connection he was experiencing now. Richard realized that true generosity was not just about writing checks. It was about seeing people, listening to their stories, and responding with genuine care and action. Richard made a decision that day. He would help Elaine, but he would do it in a way that honored her dignity and respected her independence. He did not want to just throw money at her problems. He wanted to create real opportunities for her to succeed. Richard knew that the time was coming when he would have to reveal his true identity. But first, he needed to earn Elaine's trust even more deeply. He needed her to understand that his desire to help came from a place of genuine friendship and respect, not pity or obligation. That evening, Richard sat in his hotel room and made several phone calls. He contacted a dentist he knew and arranged for Maya to receive treatment at no cost. He set up a scholarship fund that would cover Maya's education from elementary school through college. He also began planning a business venture that would create jobs and opportunities for single mothers in the community. Richard was careful to keep his involvement secret for now, but he felt a sense of purpose and excitement that he had not felt in years. Helping Elaine and her community was giving him the meaning and fulfillment he had been searching for all along. Richard sat in his hotel room the night before the big reveal. Rehearsing what he would say to Elaine, he had written down several versions of his confession, but none of them felt right. The truth was simple. He was a billionaire who had come to this town undercover, and he had been the anonymous donor helping Elaine and her daughter. But Richard worried that Elaine might feel deceived or manipulated. He valued their friendship too much to risk losing it, yet he knew that honesty was the only way forward. After hours of thinking, Richard decided to speak from his heart rather than follow a script. The next morning, Richard arrived at the diner earlier than usual. He asked Mr. Henderson if he could use the small private office in the back to speak with Elaine during her break. Mr. Henderson agreed, sensing that something important was about to happen. When Elaine arrived for her shift, Richard was already sitting at his usual table. Looking nervous, Elaine noticed his tension immediately. "Is everything okay?" she asked with concern. Richard took a deep breath and said, "I need to talk to you privately. It's important." Elaine's heart raced as she followed Richard into the back office. She had never seen him look so serious, and she wondered what could be wrong. Richard gestured for her to sit down, and he remained standing, pacing back and forth. "Elaine, there's something I need to tell you, and I'm afraid you might be angry with me," he began, Elaine felt confused and worried. "What is it?" she asked gently. Richard stopped pacing and looked directly into her eyes. "My name is Richard Crawford, and I'm not who you think I am." Richard explained everything. He told Elaine about his wealth, his business empire, and how he had felt empty despite all his success. He described how he had come to this town undercover, searching for meaning and wisdom. He admitted that he had been the anonymous donor who paid for Maya's dental treatment, covered her rent, and established the scholarship fund. With each word, Richard watched Elaine's face carefully, trying to gauge her reaction. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock, to something he could not quite read. When Richard finished speaking, the room fell silent. Elaine sat very still, processing everything she had just heard. She felt a swirl of emotions, surprise, gratitude, and yes, a touch of hurt that Richard had not been honest with her from the beginning. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked quietly. Richard sat down across from her and said, "At first, I wanted to observe without influencing people's behavior. But then I got to know you and our friendship became real. I was afraid that if I told you the truth, everything would change. You would start treating me differently like everyone else does when they find out I'm wealthy." Elaine understood his reasoning, but she still felt conflicted. "I shared so much with you. My struggles, my fears, my dreams. And all that time you were pretending to be someone else," she said, her voice breaking slightly. Richard felt terrible. "I wasn't pretending about the important things," he insisted. "My questions were real, my respect for you was real, and everything I learned from you changed my life. You taught me what it means to live with integrity, to find joy in simple things, and to care deeply about others. Those lessons were not part of an act, they were genuine." Elaine looked into Richard's eyes and saw the truth in his words. She realized that despite his deception about his identity, his character and his intentions had been honest. He had listened to her without judgment, respected her wisdom, and helped her family without expecting anything in return. Elaine took a deep breath and said, "I believe you, and I'm grateful for everything you've done. But trust is something that has to be earned again when it's broken, even if the reasons were good ones." Richard nodded. "I understand, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild that trust." Richard then shared his vision for the future. He told Elaine about his plan to create a community center focused on helping single mothers and low-income families. He explained that he wanted her to be a partner in this project, not just a beneficiary. "You have the wisdom, the experience, and the heart to lead this initiative," Richard said. "I can provide the resources, but you understand what this community needs better than I ever could. Together, we can create something truly meaningful." Elaine was stunned by his proposal. She had dreamed of helping others, but she never imagined having the opportunity to do it on such a scale. Elaine asked Richard tough questions about his intentions, his commitment, and his expectations. She wanted to make sure this was not just a wealthy man's temporary project that would disappear when he lost interest. Richard answered every question patiently and honestly. He showed her detailed plans, financial commitments, and legal documents that proved his seriousness. He also promised that Elaine would have decision-making power, and that the center would truly serve the community's needs, not just his vision of what they needed. After hours of conversation, Elaine made a decision. She would accept Richard's partnership, but on her own terms. She wanted to ensure that the community center would be built with input from the people it served, that jobs would go to local residents, and that the focus would remain on empowerment rather than charity. Richard agreed to all her conditions. He admired Elaine's strength and clarity even more now. She was not dazzled by his wealth or overwhelmed by his offer. Instead, she was thoughtful, strategic, and focused on what truly mattered. As they shook hands to seal their partnership, Elaine smiled for the first time since Richard's confession. "You know, I'm still processing all of this, but I think we can do something really special together," she said. Richard felt a wave of relief and joy. "Thank you for giving me a second chance. And thank you for teaching me what real wealth looks like," Elaine laughed softly. "I guess we both learned from each other," she said. Richard nodded, knowing that their unlikely friendship had transformed both of their lives in ways neither could have predicted. 6 months had passed since Richard revealed his true identity to Elaine, and the transformation in both their lives was remarkable. The community center they had planned together was now a reality, standing proudly on a renovated building in the heart of town. The grand opening was scheduled for today, and the entire community buzzed with excitement. Elaine stood at the entrance wearing a professional suit that Richard had helped her choose, but she insisted on wearing her old Waitress shoes underneath. To remind me where I came from, she had told him with a smile. The center was named Hope House, a name that Elaine had chosen because it represented what the place would offer to struggling families. Inside, the building contained a child care facility, a job training center, financial literacy classrooms, a food pantry, and counseling services. Every detail had been carefully planned with input from community members, especially single mothers who understood exactly what kind of help was needed most. Richard had provided the funding, but Elaine had provided the vision and the heart. On opening day, hundreds of people gathered to celebrate. Local news reporters came to cover the story, curious about the billionaire and the waitress who had formed an unlikely partnership. When it was time for speeches, Elaine stepped up to the microphone first. Her voice was steady and confident as she spoke. This center represents hope for families who are struggling, just like I was 6 months ago. It represents the belief that when we help each other, amazing things can happen. I want to thank Richard Crawford for his generosity, but more importantly, for his willingness to listen and learn from ordinary people like me. Richard took the microphone next, and his voice was filled with emotion. 6 months ago, I came to this town searching for something I couldn't name. I had all the money anyone could want, but I felt empty inside. Then I met Elaine, and she taught me that true wealth is measured by the relationships we build, the integrity we maintain, and the difference we make in other people's lives. This community center is not just my gift to you, it is your gift to me, because through this work, I have found the purpose and meaning I was searching for. The crowd erupted in applause and many people wiped away tears. Elaine and Richard cut the ribbon together, officially opening Hope House. Families immediately began exploring the different rooms and services. Single mothers signed up for job training programs. Children ran excitedly through the child care area, and volunteers organized donations in the food pantry. The energy in the building was electric, filled with hope and possibility. In the weeks that followed, Hope House became the beating heart of the community. Elaine served as the executive director, overseeing all programs and services. She hired staff members from the community, many of whom had been struggling to find work. She also created a peer support program where single mothers could mentor each other and share their experiences. The program was based on the same principles that had guided Elaine's own life: honesty, resilience, community support, and never giving up. Richard remained actively involved, but he let Elaine lead. He attended board meetings, helped with fundraising, and used his business connections to create job opportunities for program graduates. But most importantly, Richard continued learning from the people he met at Hope House. Every conversation taught him something new about courage, determination, and the human spirit. He realized that his education had truly begun the day he walked into that small diner and met Elaine. Maya, Elaine's daughter, thrived in the new environment. Her dental problems had been resolved months ago, and she now smiled brightly at everyone she met. Maya attended the after-school program at Hope House, where she received homework help and participated in enrichment activities. She told her mother every day how grateful she was for their new life. Elaine's heart swelled with pride and joy, knowing that her daughter would have opportunities she herself had never imagined. The impact of Hope House extended far beyond the families it served directly. The center inspired similar initiatives in neighboring towns, and Elaine was invited to speak at conferences about community-led development and empowerment. She never forgot her roots or the struggles she had faced, and she used her story to motivate others. Richard watched Elaine grow into a powerful community leader and felt humbled by her transformation. Though Elaine always reminded him that she had not changed. She had simply been given the opportunity to become who she was always meant to be. One evening, as they sat together reviewing the center's progress reports, Richard turned to Elaine and said, "You know, I came here thinking I would teach people something, but you ended up being my greatest teacher." Elaine smiled and replied, "We taught each other, Richard. You showed me that dreams can become reality when the right resources meet the right vision. And I showed you that wisdom doesn't come from wealth. It comes from living authentically and caring deeply about others." Their partnership had proven that when people from different backgrounds come together with mutual respect and shared purpose, extraordinary things can happen. Richard no longer felt empty or lost. He had found his calling in supporting communities and empowering people like Elaine. And Elaine had discovered her own strength and leadership abilities, proving that circumstances do not define a person's potential. As the sun set that evening, Richard and Elaine looked out the window of Hope House at the families leaving after another productive day. Children laughed, mothers chatted hopefully about new job prospects, and volunteers waved goodbye to each other. "This is what real wealth looks like," Richard said quietly. Elaine nodded and added, "And this is just the beginning." Together, they had created something beautiful and lasting, a community where everyone mattered, where struggles were met with support, and where hope was always available to those who needed it most. The billionaire and the waitress had changed each other's lives, and in doing so, they had changed an entire community.